This is the third and final video in the Graphing 101 series. The purpose of this video is to identify the differences between bar graphs and line graphs. Bar graphs are more of a descriptive type of graph. Bar graphs are used to compare groups of data such as amounts or categories to each other. You can see here we have an example of a bar graph. Along the x-axis we have different categories of library materials. We have books, periodicals, etc. Bar graphs are useful because they help us make generalizations and we can see the differences between different groups or categories. For example, in this bar graph we can see the difference between the amount of books that are circulated in the library and the amount of CDs that are circulated. Line graphs show the relationship between two variables. They show how one thing affects another. They show how or if our independent variable is going to affect the dependent variable. Oftentimes in an experiment or a graph, we will have the independent variable as time. When the independent variable is time, it's plotted on the x-axis. If you ever have time in a set of data, you will always plot it on the x-axis because it's the independent variable. That's because usually it's time that's changing. Line graphs are most useful for making predictions about data and for showing trends in the data. We can also use line graphs to compare multiple sets of data. All we need to do is use different lines within the same graph. Here's an example of a line graph. You can see that we are comparing the independent variable, which is age in years, to our dependent variable, which is the number of teens with cell phones. You can see that this axis label actually isn't very good because it should say the number of teens with cell phones because that's what we're looking at in our graph. So remember, always include all of the information about what your data is on your axes label. When we have multiple data sets on a line graph, we can use separate lines for each. We have to distinguish them, so we're going to use a distinctive color or line pattern for each data set. It's important to place an example of what color or line style you're using for each data set off to the side. That's what's called the key. You can see an example of a key here. For seedling A data, we're going to use a blue line. For seedling B data, we're going to use a red line with a square for the data about seedling B, and so on and so forth. It's important that you label your key with the name of the information being displayed. So each of these line colors and styles has information about what data is being shown. Here's an example of a line graph with multiple data sets. You can see our key here off to the side saying what each line represents. We have our axes labels, we have our y-axis with its label of units, we've got our time in days, and we've got our nice title that addresses both the independent and the dependent variables. That's all for this video. I hope that was helpful and thanks for watching.